Good evening and welcome to the October 5th, 2016 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We do have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order. The first item on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes of June 22nd, 2016 and August 17th, 2016. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll declare them approved as submitted. We have 10 public hearings scheduled for this evening, so we will roll through these as quickly as possible, but give everybody an opportunity to come up to speak. At the first public hearing that we'll have tonight is the Annexation Plan of Services and Annexation Petition for approximately 236.8 acres located along South Rutherford Boulevard. Thomas Hoover, Elizabeth Clark, et al. Are the applicants. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. I'm going to pass out a revised map that's a little bit different than the one that's on the screen. There were a number of parcels involved in this, and one of the parcels, the applicants were not able to secure it and have the owner's petition for annexation, so we are removing that. Subject property is located along the south side of South Rutherford Boulevard, east of the CSX railroad tracks and west of Southeast Broad Street. It consists of a portion of the Hoover property, which is the larger portion. You'll see on the map in front of you, and then a portion of an adjacent parcel to the south. There were also two parcels that were included as additional study area that for the most part would be sandwiched in between the existing city limits and the requested property. You'll see the property to the, it's in orange. There are two parcels. There is the Husky property, which is the spur line for Husky Truss, and the CSX right-of-way. Both of those were included as additional study area, additional study parcels in the annexation plan of services. We have not received an annexation petition on either one of those parcels. However, the applicant has been in contact with the owners of Husky Truss, and it's my understanding from the applicants that they do wish to submit an annexation petition. So both of the additional study parcels we wish to remain in the annexation plan of services. However, as you see on the revised map in front of you, that small triangular parcel along the northern property line adjacent to South Rutherford Boulevard has been taken out of the additional study area, as the applicants have not been able to secure that property and do not expect to be able to secure that property as a part of their development. Also included in the study area is approximately 3,500 linear feet of South Rutherford Boulevard right-of-way that is in front of the subject property. Before you, you have the annexation plan of services, which indicates that the city will be able to provide services to the subject property upon annexation. With regards to sewer, it has not been, there has not been a final resolution on how sewer will be provided to the subject property, but sewer can be extended to the subject property. There's a companion zoning request to CH, which is the next item on the agenda, but just as a reminder for both the Planning Commission and for the members of the audience, that the first public hearing tonight is purely with regards to the annexation of the subject property and not with regards to the zoning of the subject property. We will be having a separate public hearing on the zoning of the subject property to the commercial highway zone, which will be the next item on the agenda. So for now, the Planning Commission does need to consider or conduct a public hearing on the annexation of everything on the map on the screen, with the exception of the triangular parcel and the right-of-way directly in front of it. So in other words, what is shown on the revised illustration.
Mr. Blomley, we advertised it to include the triangular area, did we not?
That's correct.
Okay. It would seem to me it would be consistent with good planning if we kept that in the study area, even though it has not been acquired by the applicant, only because by annexing it and that gap of the right-of-way of South Rutherford Boulevard, we would have the entire South Rutherford Boulevard inside the city limits in.
Yeah, Chairman Lamb, I don't disagree with the fact that it is desirable to have that property in the city limits. According to the applicants, though, there are some extenuating circumstances with the owners of that property, and they do not feel reasonably certain that, or they feel reasonably certain that it would take months to be able to secure a written annexation petition for that property due to the current ownership configuration of that property.
I'm aware of the ownership configuration on that, but does that preclude us from annexing it?
Yes, if we don't have a written petition requesting annexation by state law, we cannot annex the property.
Either a petition or written consent. I think they could consent to it as well as petition to it, as long as we have a petition from some property owners. But regardless, they've indicated that it's just going to be a long time to get anything. Again, it doesn't hurt us to leave it in the study area tonight. Something could change, but we, unless it does, we unfortunately cannot annex that little triangle.
It's just going to leave that one little gap of Rutherford Boulevard outside of the city limits.
It does. Bad planning, but a result of the actions of the legislature.
Okay. Any other questions from Mr. Blomley? Were you through, Matt? Thank you.
Yes, as Mr. Ives said, because we did advertise that, the Planning Commission does have the opportunity to recommend the annexation of that parcel. However, if we did not receive an annexation petition prior to the City Council considering it, much the same with the additional study area, we would have to remove it. So if we didn't receive an annexation petition, it would be a choice of whether we remove it now or we remove it before City Council.
Okay.
Matthew, could we go ahead and include the Rutherford Boulevard part of it and not include the property part with a 10-foot zone that would connect it so that it wouldn't create an island, and therefore the majority of the roadway would still be for services provision? Seem like more sensible, because right now if there were an accident right there in the middle of that roadway, I think there would be some question as who would be responsible for responding to it. And I think if we just narrowed it down to a 10-foot section, I think we would dramatically reduce the possibility of a future situation. So could we potentially do just a 10-foot strip that would connect that to the county?
I believe that would be acceptable. I would yield to Mr. Ives on that.
We haven't studied that. I would say at this point that is a possibility. I wouldn't want to say right now that we can do it that way, but that is a possibility. So for that purpose, we leave it in as part of the study area, and then we'll...
The roadway would be part of the study area, but not the property.
Well, or leave the whole thing in as part of the study area, and if we end up having to not take part of it, that'll...
Can you look into that, and regardless of what happens tonight, that could be handled at the City Council level?
Absolutely.
Sounds like a plan.
Mr. Blomley, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the Planning Commission? Okay, this public hearing is for the annexation and the plan of services only pertaining to this application. If you've never been to one of our public hearings before, I'll briefly go over our rules. We'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak either for or against the proposal. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and give your address for the record. Limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, because we do have 10 public hearings tonight we will be going through. I have a lot of other people on other public hearings that would like to come up and speak later. So that being said, if you have questions, we'll make a note of your questions, and the staff will try to answer the questions at the conclusion of the public hearing. At each public hearing, you'll be given one opportunity to come forward and ask your questions or state your opinion. All that being said, I'll open the public hearing on this application at this time. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak pertaining to the annexation and plan of services. Anybody at all? Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Any questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Here,
We're going to go
go
ahead.
ahead, Kathy, I'm sorry.
I think the biggest question is if we think we can go ahead and recommend annexation on the entire area and then let you all
Work
deal
it out.
with it at the time of...
Yeah, I believe that Planning Commission can go ahead and recommend the entire area, and obviously if we don't have either consent or a petition from both from the owners, that little triangle piece, and also from CSX Railroad and from Husky Trust with regard to the spur line that runs into them, then we, that'll have to be backed
Move it
out.
at the
And
council.
no matter what we've recommended, council cannot annex that. Obviously, we can come back later if they can end up getting signatures 6 months from now. We can come back and fill that in.
I think that's a prudent thing to do, Dave.
I agree. Is that a motion, Kathy?
I'm ready for a motion.
Well, did anybody else have any comments?
I was just going to second your motion.
Okay, well then, yes, we'll make that in the form of a motion. I'll make a motion to approve this annexation request as originally advertised and submitted.
Motion's made.
Second.
And seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. Item B, zoning application for approximately 227 acres located along South Rutherford Boulevard to be zoned commercial highway simultaneous with annexation. Fedex Ground is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. It's for the same property that we just considered for annexation. The request is to zone it to CH, Commercial Highway District, simultaneous with annexation for the development of a FedEx distribution center. Subject property, the total study area, including right-of-way, 227.7 acres. Directly to the east of the CSX right-of-way, as you can see on the map before you, just to the east of the CSX right-of-way are a number of light industrial uses, light industrial and commercial uses zoned LI, located along the South Church Street frontage road. To the northwest of the subject property, zoned HI, that's Husky Truss and Southern Container. Located across South Rutherford Boulevard to the north is are several vacant tracts. To the south of the subject property are several large vacant tracts in the unincorporated county, as well as to the southeast of the subject property are several single-family residential uses located along Tulip Hill Drive that are located in the unincorporated county and are zoned RM, medium-density residential in the county. The applicant, as I mentioned, wishes to develop a new 947,842 square foot distribution center. The use is classified as warehousing and transporting in the zoning ordinance, and that use is permitted by right in the commercial highway zone. That is the lowest intensity zoning district that particular use would be allowed in, so the applicants have requested the CH zone for their property. We did hold a neighborhood meeting in conjunction with the applicants at Patterson Park on Monday evening. Had about probably 10 or 12 neighboring property owners attend the meeting to discuss the proposed annexation, zoning, and the development of the subject property. Before conducting the public hearing, Ms. Cherie Akers with Stantec representing FedEx has a brief presentation that she would like to make regarding the request. I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing.
Ms. Akers.
Good evening. How are you? Again, for the record, my name is Cherie Akers, and I represent FedEx Ground, who is the contract purchaser for the property. As Matthew has indicated, the property is located along South Rutherford Boulevard, east of I-24 and west of Southeast Broad Street. Again, as Matthew has suggested, we're asking for a request for medium residential within the county jurisdiction, and we're requesting a commercial highway designation in the city of Murfreesboro. FedEx is proposing to build one of their FedEx Flex Hub distribution centers that will consist of approximately 947,000 square feet, 842 square feet. And this is to help do their business here in Middle Tennessee. It's grown and doubled in size with the growth that's occurred here, and they need an additional distribution center. They have an existing facility here in Murfreesboro. Upon completion of this facility, that facility will close, and those employees will move over and be offered positions at this facility. As Matthew indicated, there's a number of industrial parcels within the surrounding area due to the proximity to I-24, and therefore we feel the commercial highway is somewhat of a downgrade from an industrial of the adjacent properties. There are some vacant residential to the north and south. The properties located to the north are under the same family ownership, a few of them, and to the south are some large vacant properties that are used for farming at this time. The additional 25 acres that you see abuts Southeast Broad Street, that is under the same property owner that we are purchasing the property from. That will remain not part of this parcel. He will remain ownership of that. And I believe on your future land use map, that is designated as mixed use. This is just a slide to kind of show you, Husky Truss and Building Supply and West Rock are industrial parcels that are located directly north of us. As Matthew has indicated, I know he talked about in the plan of services, the sewer. We have met with Husky property owner. Most likely they will be able to provide us an easement on their property in order for us to connect to sewer off of Rutherford Boulevard to a manhole that's located there. And just wanted to give a little brief about Fedex. This is a $189 million investment for them to locate this facility here in Murfreesboro. Within 2 years, there'll be approximately 230 employees. 41 of them will be full-time managers. 189 are part-time package handlers who are also offered full benefits. And then there are a couple of hundred of independent contractors and drivers that deliver the packages. We are not here to discuss really the site plan. We have submitted a site plan to the city that will become before you probably by the end of this month, beginning of November. But just to give you briefly a few points, our access is going to be provided along South Rutherford. We'll have one main access that you see, the dark shaded area, that will provide truck access for the facility. The second entrance closer east to Southeast Broad will be an employee-only entrance for the different shifts. And then in the future, we have a third access that will also allow for trucks and vans. And at the request of the city, we are also going to be showing a future right-of-way in order to provide access to those parcels located to the south of us. We have already discussed that with staff, and we're willing to do that and work that out through the site plan process. And also provide a 30-foot sewer easement located along Lytle Creek because it's on your future plans for sewer. So Fedex has agreed to offer that to the city. And this is just a little bit of our landscape plan to show you there's quite a bit of native vegetation out on site. We're going to try to preserve as much as we can in order to provide the buffers, and for those property owners to the south, they can continue to have the same view they have now. With the exception that there will be some invasive species that we will have to remove as part of the permitting process.
Poison ivy, rattlesnakes.
And there is the 100-year floodplain is located in the east side of our property. We will not impact the floodplain. We are not proposing any development in the floodplain, and we will continue to stay out of that and maintain it. This is just an image. I thought I'd just show you that shows what you'll see from South Rutherford. We're also proposing to increase our buffers beyond what's required by code, and staff will be reviewing that during the site plan process. We've also increased the buffer along the south property line. I think a 12-foot is required. We will be maintaining a 25-foot buffer plus some additional berming and landscaping so that any adjacent property owners will continue to have their more native view. This is just describing the landscape buffer. But one other thing I wanted to say, we did have a neighborhood meeting, and there were some concerns regarding traffic. As part of the site plan process, we have submitted a traffic study to the city. It's currently under review now, and it will come before you when we come for site planning. But Fedex is very committed to anything that requires us to make the traffic more safe, more efficient for both Fedex and for the community. In that traffic study, we are recommending a number of improvements that Fedex is committed to doing and constructing in order for the site to work efficiently and to offset any negative impacts, if any, that this project will provide. And we do have our transportation engineers here today. If you have any specific questions about the details, they will be happy to answer them for you. But we thank you. Fedex is very excited to come to Murfreesboro, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Akers. Any questions from members of the Planning Commission?
I may have misheard this, and I'm sure I did. I thought I heard medium density residential. Were you just speaking of the adjacent property, or did I misunderstand what you said?
The medium residential is what it's currently zoned in.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. If there's no other questions, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward. Now, let me remind you, this public hearing is for annexation purposes only and zoning. We did the annexation in the last one. This is for the zoning. And we do not have the traffic study. We have no information on the traffic, so we will not be taking into account tonight traffic, turn lanes, drainage, lighting, and other things like that that we'll be into full discussion on when it comes to the site plan review. So just bear that in mind as we come up, because we're talking about the zoning right here. So I'll ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak to come to the microphone.
Not yet. Oh, Dick Baines. Comes to every council meeting.
Hi. I'm Richard Baines. I live on Parkview Terrace at the corner of Southeast Broad. And I apologize for reading, but at my age, if I try to speak extemporaneously, I'll probably forget where I'm at or fall asleep. I'm not here to approve or disapprove the prospect of another warehouse in Murfreesboro. If that's the best we can do, so be it. Traffic is a quality of life issue. It is the number one complaint that I hear from folks who live here. And the representative from Standeck made a valid point when she noted that the Fedex site would generate less traffic than a 500-home development. Tuesday, I went to the planning department to take a peek at the traffic study, only to find out that it was still a work in process. In my conversation with the young man from planning, I noted that FedEx already had a presence in Murfreesboro over on Park Avenue. He acknowledged this, saying that they had outgrown those facilities. When I then asked how many were currently employed there, his reply was 200, but there would be offers at jobs at the new site. 200 seemed a bit high, but I assumed that his info was pretty accurate. This brings up the subject of employment. The news release seems designed to mislead the reader as to how many jobs are being added. The term full-time equivalent is an accounting term used in reporting to the Federal Affordable Care Act and involves developing a ratio of part-timers to full-timers. To use this term in a press release is deceptive in that unless one understands what the term means, it could be misinterpreted as meaning full-time jobs and benefits. Given the fact that there seems to be X number of employees already at FedEx, are the job numbers quoted in the press new hires or the relocation of existing jobs? Where tax incentives are used, I think that the public deserves accurate information to form an opinion as to the wisdom of our investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. Anybody else? Nobody? Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Questions by members of the Planning Commission? If there's no questions, we're ready for a motion.
Well, do we want to try to answer? Does anybody have an answer for Mr. Baines' question? The number of
Mr. Lamb,
Yes, sir.
I wish you would, or let staff explain to the audience what site plan review will be and how this is, it will go into great detail into this, the actually plan of the site, from everything from the drainage ditches to the berms to the traffic study to the turning lanes. We're not discussing that tonight, but I want the audience to understand that that's a whole process in itself. And
Yes, sir. Vice Chairman Young. The next step in the process is obviously the annexation and the zoning still have to be reviewed and approved by the City Council. They have the final say on annexation and zoning. But the more detailed plans come at site plan review, at the site plan review stage with the Planning Commission. That's when plans are submitted to us, which they have been submitted to us, but the Planning Commission has not. They have not been before the Planning Commission yet. But before they ever get to Planning Commission, we scrutinize the plans for things such as traffic issues that have been discussed about this project, drainage issues, buffering, screening, minimum parking requirements, access points, off-site road improvements. All of these things are things that we look at for any site plan that comes before us. And so when we review the plans, we'll have a whole host of recommendations and proposed revisions to the plans that the applicants must address before the plans even get to the Planning Commission. And then once we feel the plans are in good enough order to bring before you, we will bring them before you with additional recommendations. So it's a lot of scrutiny is put forth by both staff and the Planning Commission on the plans when they're submitted to us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Plumley.
I better shut up. We'll go to 11 o'clock.
Any other comments or questions by the Planning Commission?
Bob, I have one question,
Yes, sir.
and it may be for Ms. Akers. I'm trying to get a feel. I rode out through the area this afternoon at about 4 o'clock to get an understanding of what's going on in the neighborhood and what the feel of the neighborhood is at that time of day. The one thing that I don't know exactly, I know that Amazon has been mentioned and stuff like that, and this will be primarily like the Park Avenue facility, except larger, is what I'm understanding. This will be a cross-dock operation. Is that correct?
I'm going to have Fedex come up and describe the facility.
What was the term you used?
Jack Pfeiffer with
A
Fedex.
cross-dock operation where material's not stored in a warehouse atmosphere. It's just basically moved from one side of the dock to a truck that's going out the other side of the dock with destination predetermined.
That's right. This is going to be a small package delivery hub, and it will, as Cherie stated earlier, it will employ 230 team members. We're going to have 41 of those will be full-time employees, and 189 will be part-time employees. And wanted to address the question as well that was earlier asked about how many employees we have presently in the area. We have 110 employees at our current facility here, and that includes 20 full-time employees and another 90 part-time employees. So this will be a significant increase in employment opportunities that we're bringing to the area.
Just on
What was your name, sir?
My name again is Jack Pfeiffer.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeiffer. Any other questions from Mr. Pfeiffer? Thank you, sir.
Jack, let me follow up on, I think, where Mr. Baines may have been going. The part-time jobs, will those have benefits as well, or will those be, and is there a time period that you must work there in order to qualify for those benefits?
Yeah, those jobs will have benefits, full benefit package that is up to, covers load percentage of approximately 18%, and it does kick in after 1,000 hours worked. But that will include tuition reimbursement, health insurance, other insurances that are necessary, and retirement plans.
The whole world's going to full-time part.
That's all I got.
You see it in your business too, don't you, a lot?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pfeiffer.
Thank you all.
There's no further questions or comments. We're ready for a motion.
Chairman Lane, I'll make a motion that we approve the application subject to any staff comments.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next public hearing is an annexation plan of services and an annexation petition for approximately 77.1 acres located along Manchester Pike and Dilton Mankin Road Mankin Family Limited Partnership is the applicant. Mr. Plumley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. Subject property is located along the east side of Manchester Pike and along the north side of Dilton-Mankin Road. It's in the orange color on the map in front of you. It's currently developed with just one house and primarily just a vacant tract. It's not currently contiguous with the existing city limits. So as you can see, we have included right-of-way that would connect it to the existing city limits further to the northwest along Manchester Pike. We've also included the right-of-way of Dilton-Mankin Road for most of the subject property, as well as some right-of-way of Manchester Pike south of the subject property, and that's because there is planned to be a future traffic signal there at the intersection of Manchester Pike and Dilton-Mankin Road, and by annexing some of the right-of-way south of that intersection, that will mean that all of the approaches and all of the signal elements will be contained within city right-of-way. The subject property, 77.1 acres, including the right-of-way, has been requested for annexation, petitioned in writing. As I mentioned, by annexing the adjacent right-of-way, we are making it contiguous with the existing city limits. Property is within the city's urban growth boundary, and a plan of services has been submitted that shows that the city will be able to provide services upon annexation. One thing I did want to mention, this is the first case of a step system in the city limits of Murfreesboro. The STEP stands for Septic Tank Effluent Pumping. CUD, Consolidated Utility District, already has a number of step systems located in the unincorporated county. Up until now, the city has not been in the business of maintaining and operating step systems, but recently the City Council has approved for the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department to begin to maintain and operate step systems. And so this will be if approved, will be the first development with a step system within the city limits of Murfreesboro that will allow them to achieve a greater density than if they developed in the county on septic tanks. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions regarding the annexation. And as I mentioned previously for the last application, this first public hearing regarding this property is only with respect to the annexation. The zoning of the property will be the next public hearing on the agenda. So this first one is pertaining just to the annexation of the subject property. I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Blomley? Okay. This public hearing, like he said, is for the annexation only. I'll open the public hearing at this time, ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak.
Hi, I'm Emily Kelly. We live in Watts Farm, which is behind this annexation. I don't really have a question, just have a concern because it's my understanding from talking to the county road superintendent and the city planning commission that the road's now going to be in the city. And so when y'all design that or when it's designed, the slope is too steep coming down to where the new stoplight is going to be. Every time there's a first rain, somebody has a wreck. It's a fender bender. I haven't seen any big wrecks, but there is one almost every time it rains. And now you're talking about adding 300 more cars. What I read on the website, or maybe when I was talking to the planning department, they said there were going to be 163 homes in there. So assuming most everybody has 2 cars anymore, that's another 300 cars. So we already wait at key times during the day up to 20 minutes all the way back to Lee Springs Branch to be able to make a left turn to go to Joe B. Jackson to go get on the interstate. So that happens in the morning and in the evening. So, and when, according to the paper, when Fedex comes in there, that's going to be also impacting right down there because we're close to that, so off the Manchester Highway. So if that could be taken into account to reduce the slope coming down to that light. I know there, the person at the planning department said there was going to be a left turn lane. That'll be a great help. But I'm concerned because right now, I've never had to sit on top of the creek, but I know people who have, to be able to go all the way down and make a left turn. So that's our concern.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Anybody else? Nobody? Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. Any comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
Matthew, it's my understanding that there will be a right turning lane, stacking lane that will be put in with the road improvements when this property is rezoned, which will dramatically improve it, because currently with a single lane, anybody who's normally going to turn right has to sit there behind the people who are turning left. So should be a dramatic improvement theoretically. Theoretical, you'll think about that when you're sitting in traffic sometime there at that intersection. But give me some guesstimation of what you think the number of homes could be developed on this with the septic system that is proposed.
The planned development, which is the next item on the agenda, proposes 163 homes. And what they're showing the homes with a minimum of 7,000 square feet, but due to the large area that's needed for the step fields, a good deal of that property, I don't know the exact number of acres, but a good deal of that property will remain used solely for the step fields.
Yeah, I'm kind of going out of bounds on that one because, as has been pointed out to me, that probably is more of the zoning question, but I do think it impacts the traffic that's on the roadway, and I think that's something that I feel needs to be considered when we look at whether or not it should be annexed. But if there's no other questions, I would approve for the annexation, subject staff comments.
Second.
And seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next public hearing is a zoning application for approximately 77.1 acres located along Manchester Pike and Dilton Mankin Road to be zoned PRD as Mankin Point, simultaneous with annexation. Old South Properties Incorporated is the applicant. Mr. Blumley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. This is the same property that we just considered for annexation. It is a request to zone it PRD, Planned Residential District, simultaneous with annexation. The PRD would allow for the development of 163 single-family lots, and that would be on the step system that I mentioned earlier. Mr. Matt Taylor will come up in just a moment and make a presentation on the specifics of the development, including the layout of the development and the homes and the amenities. But I did want to point out the adjacent land uses before Mr. Taylor gets up there. Directly to the north of the subject property is a large tract that has a horse farm on it. There is a stub street to that tract should it ever develop. To the west of the subject, or excuse me, to the east of the subject property is the aforementioned Watts Farm single-family residential subdivision located in the unincorporated county. To the south of the subject property is another single-family residential subdivision, Mankinville Estates, located along the south side of Dilton Mankin Road across the street from the subject property. And to the west of the subject property across Manchester Pike are a number of large estate lots, single-family residences, and there are some commercial uses directly adjacent to the subject property along the east side of Manchester Pike. With that being said, I believe Mr. Taylor has a PowerPoint presentation that he would like to give on the proposed development. One thing that I did want to mention that I neglected to mention was that we did hold a neighborhood meeting on this request on September 19th. That was very well attended. I'd say we probably had about 25 or 30 folks there. One of the main issues that was discussed was traffic at that meeting, and Mr. Taylor has made a significant revision to his plan based upon the feedback that was received at that meeting, and Mr. Taylor will go over that change.
Thank you, Matthew. Matt Taylor of SEC here in town, and I'm accompanied tonight by the applicant, Mr. Dan Bobo of Old South Properties. I do have a brief presentation to go over to introduce you to Mankin Point subdivision. If we can put that on the monitor. Thank you. start by orienting you to the site. The property is about 71 acres in size. It's located at the northeast corner of Manchester Highway and Dilton-Mankin Road. There are currently a single house and a couple of farm or agricultural structures on the property. All of those will be removed with the construction of this development. The current use of the property is agriculture in nature. It's mainly just open farmland. We are bounded by Lee's Spring Branch on the east side, Dilton-Mankin on the south, and then Manchester Highway on the west, and then another large tract that's been used for a horse farm to the north of us. Just showing the existing zonings. By and large, we're surrounded by county, but we do get back into the city to the south and to the north. This is the existing intersection at Sugar Bush. This is a picture of Lee's Spring Branch. This is the intersection of Dilton-Mankin and Manchester that will be improved. And a picture of the property itself. It's pretty consistent across the property there. The plan itself does allow for 163 single-family detached dwellings across the 71 acres. That's a density of about 2.3 units to the acre, which is an extremely low density. And the minimum lot size for those lots would be 7,000 square feet in size. That's a typical lot size of 55 by 130. And then the home sizes range from starting at 2,000 square feet all the way up over 3,000 square feet in size. Our setbacks would be a 35-foot for the front, 5 feet for the side, and 20 feet for the rear. All the roads inside of Mankin Point will be public right-of-way. Will be dedicated to the city after they're constructed. We'll have sidewalks along both sides of all of our streets. And as Matthew said, this will be the city's first step system, which is the lighter shade of green located on the southern portion of the property. With the low density, we are maintaining almost half the property in green space, either through stormwater, open areas, the floodplain, or the step system. And we'll have all underground utilities and decorative mailboxes throughout. Stormwater areas are located along the western portion of the property as well as the eastern portion of the property to control our stormwater runoff as we exit the site. One thing about the site is we are developing all of our property outside the 100-year floodplain. Through the Lee Springs Branch study that the city did several years ago, we know that there are some wetlands just over the bank of Lee Springs Branch, so we wanted to stay out of those. And so we've done that by staying out of the 100-year floodplain altogether, locating amenities and stormwater along that side. The homes will all be 1 and 2 stories. As I mentioned earlier, they'll start at 2,000 square feet and go up over 3,000. We will have all 2-car garages. Those garage doors will be decorative in nature. Have high-quality materials, be brick, stone, cement board siding. The only vinyl will be allowed in trim, soffits, and gable areas. The architecture is taken from Puckett Station, one of our more successful neighborhoods in Murfreesboro as of late. It's a craftsman-style home, and here's a couple of examples. All these will have front entry garages with enough room in front of the homes to park 4 cars outside of that garage. The amenities, we've got a lot of green space and buffering between the roadways and the back of our homes along our formal entrance along Manchester Highway, along with some passive areas between our lots and the step fields. And then the more structured amenities will be located along the east side of our development, where we'll construct a pavilion and playground, and then have a walking trail that meanders through the open space on this side, and we'll connect back in with our sidewalks along the public roads to allow good pedestrian access throughout the neighborhood. Here's an example of the type pavilion we plan to construct, and a similar playground, and then the walking trails. access. We will have two primary access points. One of those will be off Dilton-Mankin Road, and the other will be off Manchester Highway. We have already completed a traffic impact study, have submitted that to the Planning Engineering Department for their review, and will construct all the improvements that are required out of that. TDOT has planned to signalize and improve the intersection of Dilton-Mankin and Manchester Highway. That is supposed to be in their bid letting schedule for October, so we'd anticipate that construction probably to start at around the first of the year, well ahead of construction of homes here and any development taking place here. Our access point was one of the largest things that came out of our neighborhood meeting. We had originally planned our second access point, which is onto Dilton-Mankin, to align with Sugar Bush, and we moved, at their request, we looked at and did move that access point to the far east side of our project. So hopefully we have accommodated some neighbors with that. And as Matthew said, we've also provided a stub back to the north in case of future development there. I'll be happy to answer any questions now or after the public hearing that you might have.
Any questions from the Planning Commission for Matt?
Yeah, Matt, tell me again what the state's going to do.
The state is going to signalize the intersection of Dilton-Mankin and Manchester Highway, and with that, they will also be constructing a 3-lane cross-section on Dilton-Mankin that will allow one in on that'll go eastbound on Dilton-Mankin, and then two exit lanes, if you will, westbound on Dilton-Mankin that will allow a leftbound south turn on the Manchester and a northbound right turn on the Manchester back toward town proper. They will also be constructing a southbound left turn on Manchester Highway onto Dilton-Mankin itself.
And that's going to bid in January, we hope?
No, I think it should bid this month. It should be in October's letting was the last schedule that I heard. And going through the TDOT process, that typically takes several months to work those contracts out. So I would anticipate construction starting at the first of the year.
So knowing how subdivisions work, but being up here, it may be 2 years before he ever builds the first house. But the Dilton-Mankin Road is going to be fixed within months, hopefully, to give the neighbors out there and Watts Farm and all that area some immediate relief to get out on Manchester Highway?
Yes, sir. Our anticipated phasing would be, our first entrance would be the entrance off Manchester Highway, where we will basically be extending TDOT's improvements, the left turn, back toward town to allow a dedicated left turn into our entrance, as well as a right turn into our entrance. That will be at our first phase. The entrance onto Dilton-Mankin is proposed to be in our third phase. We would anticipate starting infrastructure construction in the spring of 17 sometime, and so that probably puts the first houses being built in the fall to winter of 17, starting construction. So you'd probably see this first people start to live there sometime in early 18. And I would think that we anticipate this to be around a 4 to 7 year build out with these number of lots.
The point I wanted to make, if I'm understanding it correctly, that the neighbors are going to get some relief in a relatively short period of time, considering how long it takes to build a road?
Yes, sir. And I would anticipate those improvements to be done well before our first home is started out there, actually.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Matt? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, that being said, I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak on the zoning application. Anybody at all? You must have done a good job on your neighborhood meeting. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Comments or questions from the Planning Commission members?
If none, I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item E is an annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 21.5 acres located along West Thompson Lane. Diane and Grant Kelly are the applicants. Mr. Plumley.
Ms. Green will be taking this one.
Ms. Green,
You're welcome.
tell me.
Thank you. This next item is to consider an annexation petition that's been submitted to the Planning Department and a plan of services that's been prepared and provided to you for property that's located north of West Thompson Lane. The subject property is a total of 23 acres. However, 1.5 acres is already located in city limits and was annexed in the mid-'80s. So the remaining 21.5 acres is still in the unincorporated area of Rutherford County. So this annexation study is to consider annexing the remainder portion of this property. We do have a petition from the property owners, Diane and Grant Kelly, who have petitioned their property be annexed. And this, of course, is the matter of the annexation. There is a contract by Mr. Stephen Dodson to purchase the property, and he will be the applicant for the next item, which is to consider a zoning change request. But this time, we're considering the annexation. This property is located within the city's urban growth boundary. It is contiguous with city limits on multiple sides, and we've provided you a plan of services that demonstrates the city can provide services in a reasonable amount of time. Many of our services are already being provided to the study area. The right-of-way of West Thompson Lane is already located in the city limits, and so there's no right-of-way being included with this study. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing on the matter of the annexation petition and plan of services, and then formulate a recommendation to City Council. The subject of this public hearing is for the annexation, and we'll consider the rezoning request in the next public hearing.
Okay. Any questions? If not, I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Okay, seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing.
It's too easy.
Yeah.
Let's do it again.
Seeing none,
Make a motion.
yes, I would. Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next is a zoning application for the same property, 21.5 acres, located along West Thompson Lane to be zoned PRD simultaneous with annexation to rezone approximately 1.5 acres from RS-15 to PRD and to rezone approximately 1.1 acres from CU to PRD, Caroline Farms. Steve Dotson is the applicant. Ms. Green?
Thank you. Yes, it is. This is a companion zoning change request, as I mentioned with the previous agenda item. The property being considered for annexation is identified in two colors, and that's the blue and the purple on the map. The purple area is currently zoned RS-15 and was zoned such when it was annexed in 1987 with an interim zoning of RS-15. And so their request is for you to change that RS-15 zone to PRD, with planned residential district. The remainder of the property, which you just considered for annexation, they're asking for you to zone PRD simultaneous with the annexation. And a very difficult to see orange strip of property with a little nub at the top running along the eastern property line, which is actually a part of the MTSU property. It's currently zoned CU, College University, and that is going to become a part of this property, part of this development plan. So the request is to change the CU zoning for that small portion of property to PRD, Planned Residential District. I mentioned Mr. Stephen Dodson does have a contract to purchase this property, and he's the applicant for this zoning change request. The properties to the north are in the unincorporated area of Rutherford County, but the contiguous properties are within city limits. I mentioned MTSU has property to the east. To the west are properties on PRD, Planned Residential District, and that's the future location of the General's Landing PRD, which you considered this past year. General's, they currently are developed with, I think, just one single-family home, but the General's Landing PRD will have 31 single-family lots along its western property line near Northborough Court, and then 130 multifamily townhomes in the remainder of the development. This applicant is requesting to zone the property PRD to allow single-family lots. They considered a multifamily use such as the townhomes, but wanted something that would stand out and be different than the General's Landing or retreat that's located right next door. So they're asking for the 24.1 acres zone PRD to allow 112 single-family detached lots for a density of 4.6 dwelling units per acre. They are proposing fairly small lots at 5,250 square feet. The minimum home size will be 1,800 square feet, and then in addition to that, it'll have a two-car garage with a decorative door. And I'm going to invite the applicant's representative, Mr. Rob Mulchin, to the lectern to go through the specifics of the plan with you. If you have questions, I'll be glad to answer them. I did want to point out a very important part of this plan is a north-south connector that's consistent with our major thoroughfare plan. It's for a road to connect West Thompson Lane to Cherry Lane, and this plan is accommodating that and building a portion of that connector, and that's something that we are glad to see as it's a part of the major thoroughfare plan.
That's important.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, Commissioners. Rob Molchen, SEC, here tonight on behalf of Stephen Dotson to represent our plan for Carolyn Farms PRD. Little background on the property itself. I'm bring the slides up. A little overview of the property itself is located just north and adjacent to West Thompson Lane. You can see on the aerial photography here, Siegel High School is immediately to the south, along with Siegel Middle and Elementary to the east. Directly to the east of the property is the Middle Tennessee Miller Coliseum. To the left, as Margaret alluded to, is the recently approved General's Landing PRD. And then to the north is primarily agricultural lands that are, a portion of that is city property, but also part of that is residential medium density home lots in Rutherford County. As Margaret alluded to, directly to the east, the college portion is the green area in regards to the Miller Coliseum, the PRD for General's Landing. And then to the north and to the east is the Siegel Soccer Complex, as Margaret alluded to. I'll talk a little bit here in a little bit. There's a connectivity road that is part of the major thoroughfare plan that'll bring that into play as well. Just an example of how the existing topography lays. The property pretty much breaks in two directions. The northern half, which is the bigger rectangle, flows towards the north, and the skinnier leg actually flows to the south and west towards West Thompson Lane.
Looks like it's just a tad.
Utilities, we've got Murfreesboro Sewer and Water located at West Thompson Lane. There's also an affluent line that runs along the eastern boundary of our property along the Miller Coliseum property, and then also a portion of that, excuse me, portion of that actually comes across our property and goes over to the farmlands to the west. The affluent is discharged into the farms. Here's a view looking on West Thompson Lane from our site to the west and back towards the east. In this area here, this is primarily a 3-lane cross section with bike lanes on both sides. There's a few views of the existing property looking towards the north from West Thompson Lane. There are a couple of houses on the site that will be removed as part of this project. This is a view of the equestrian fields at Miller Coliseum next door. And then this is the entrance to Siegel High School that will our entrance will align with this entrance to the high school, as you'll see in the plans coming up. As we're asking for a PRD zoning, we're looking for roughly 112 single-family detached lots on 24.13 acres. That's roughly 4.6 dwelling units to the acre. The minimum lot width will be about 50 feet. We have a couple different lot sizes. The minimum is a 5,250 square foot lot. It's due to a constriction of the first couple lots as you come in the neighborhood. But the typical lot size is about 6,000 square foot, which is typically about a 50 by 130 in depth and width. The homes will range from 1,800 square feet up to 3,000 plus square feet. These will all be public streets. This will be a walkable community with sidewalks on both sides of every street in the development. We're proposing roughly about 2 acres of open space, which will be primarily used for our stormwater management facilities. We'll also hold a little bit of our decorative elements in regards to our streetscapes coming into the neighborhood. All utilities will be underground, and we'll be using decorative lights and mailboxes throughout the community. As Margaret alluded to, the major roadway that's portion of this property is on the major thoroughfare. It's a connector street, 3 lanes for a connection between West Thompson Lane and Cherry Lane to the north. This property will allow the master thoroughfare plan to be completed and connect itself up to the Siegel Soccer Complex to the east of this major thoroughfare leading up to Cherry Lane. The cross section for this is going to be a kind of a little bit of a hybrid, but it's going to be a 55-foot wide right-of-way. It's a 3-lane roadway, so they have 2 dedicated lanes of travel with a center turn lane running the entire length of the major roadway through the neighborhood. As you can see here in the plan itself, the major roadway itself runs east to west. North to south, running across the property. It then takes a jog to the east and then back towards the north. And this is the connection here on the northern portion will be the leg that will connect up to Cherry Lane and will provide access to Siegel Soccer Complex in the future. Our first access point will be, of course, along West Thompson Lane. As you can see here, we've aligned with the Siegel High School entrance across the street. We're proposing a 4-lane cross-section leading out of this development. That'll give you a dedicated right-hand turn lane back towards the west and West Thompson Lane, a dedicated straight back over to the Siegel High School entrance, and then a dedicated left lane to head east on West Thompson Lane, and then also an entrance lane coming into the development. Our second point of ingress to this site will be, of course, the connection to the lane to be built in the future towards Cherry Lane. And then also we're looking at connecting over to the recently approved General's Landing, creating a third access point to the site. The homes themselves, 2 stories, as I noted earlier, 1,800 square feet to 3,000 plus square feet. 2-car garages. They will be all front entry garages with decorative garage doors. We'll be looking at using primarily a masonry type product, brick, stone, or a cement board, with vinyl only being in the trim and soffit, gables, and dormers of these homes. Here's a few examples of what the conceptual architecture we're looking forward to bringing to Murfreesboro with this development.
Gingerbread house.
A little bit of some classical looks, Tudor styles. And I spoke a little bit earlier about amenities. We're looking at, like I said, we've got 2 main locations for open space within the community. Firstly, the entrance area along West Thompson Lane, and then also there'll be another detention facility at the rear of the property that will handle our stormwater management at the northern portion of the property. At the entrance, the open space there, the amenities, we're looking at creating a masonry type signage that will be incorporated into a 4-rail fence that will run along West Thompson Lane and up along the entire length of this green space back into the community along this new thoroughfare, kind of creating our signature entrance piece to the community. With that, I'm available for any questions now or after the public hearing. I appreciate your time.
Any questions for Mr. Molchan?
Yes. At the end of your development into Cherry Lane, approximately how far is that? And are you going to carry 3 lanes all the way to Cherry Lane?
Yeah, that's as part of the major thoroughfare plan. We'll be carrying that 3-lane cross section all the way through the development from West Thompson Lane up to the jog, through the jog, and up to going up to the extended piece of the city property that comes down from the Siegel Soccer Complex.
Will the city build that, or will that be private development, Mr. Whitaker?
That would be the city, and from our estimation, about 3,000 feet of road to get to the Cherry Lane connector.
From the end of that development, about 3,000 feet.
I think it's about 3,000 feet, and this will go a long way to help relieve some pressure once that's done off Thompson Lane. And Mr. Dotson has been gracious enough to work with us to get this. This is the last chance we have actually to get this connector in, and it's a very valuable connector. And we'll work diligently with the council, mayor and council, to try to get this funded.
That was going to be my next question, but
And the reason the city would participate is because a lot of that is city-owned property.
right.
That's why we.
And there's a potential Greenway trail that
That
runs
is
up through
correct.
there also.
We have also talked to the parks about coming on the backside of this and putting in hopefully a 12-foot wide path all the way from Thompson all the way back to Cherry Lane as well. And then hopefully the parks would like to even connect that on to our park property across Thompson at the school. So
It's good.
I know you say you talked to Parks. Did you talk to MTSU?
absolutely, we the 15 feet that you see that is part of the you'll go back and you'll see a 15-foot strip, which will actually be incorporated into a drainage area. We actually have a 60-foot water and sewer easement that was actually part of their property, and they graciously have agreed. Mr. Huddleston met with them and may have some more information, but they graciously, our plan initially was to put that road on that 60-foot strip, so they were happy to see that road go through the subdivision and connect and not have an additional road and we're willing to provide that 15-foot strip for the drainage area on the backside of these lots.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, Sam Huddleston, City Engineering Department, and I'll follow up a little bit with Mr. Whitaker's comments. The MTSU Miller Coliseum committee has approved the property easements and transfers we've described, and then they have also approved granting easements for the city to construct the greenway along the MTSU property, and then they've also given us a landscape installation and maintenance agreement. They would prefer that we maintain everything outside the horse fence, and we've discussed that with Parks and Rec, and that seems to be an amenable arrangement. But the trail in this location would be on MTSU's Miller Coliseum property.
Okay.
Will it run to 231?
The trail that we are looking at comes out of the Greenways, Blueways, Bikeways Master Plan. It's called the Greenway Connector 2. It's intended to go from Thompson Lane to Siegel Soccer Park. We'll add to the details of Thompson Lane. Mr. Smotherman suggested several months ago that we investigate a multi-use path along Thompson Lane. That's currently in the preliminary design on Thompson Lane. And then Cherry Lane, we're also working to put a multi-use trail along the southern side of Cherry Lane. And then we also have a trail system already constructed in Siegel Park that make an easy connection there. The next gap for us would actually be from Siegel Soccer Park to the North Greenway, North Murfreesboro Greenway that's currently under construction along the East Fork of the Stones River.
Okay.
So this theoretically would give us a link in the future from the Walter Hill Park and the Coleman Farm trailhead south, potentially connecting us all the way to Barfield Crescent with one continuous network of greenways and trails.
And Sam, along with that, I don't know how much of it's constructed, if any, but there is a right-of-way dedicated across a development that goes north of Cherry Lane. Started out as a townhouse development, and I think it's now converted to at least partly single-family. But there is a pathway dedicated to get the length of that property, and then we'll need more right-of-way after that.
That's correct. We've been master planning that Greenway connection for it seems like 10 or 15 years now. And a little bit of an update on Cherry Lane. That Cherry Lane project is projected to be under construction and by contract or by our agreement for the state and federal and local funding be under construction within the next 3 years. We're in the detailed design phase and trying to finalize the details of that. But it's a very large project, and $32 million worth of joint funding on that project that would take us from the end of Siegel Park to Broad Street, including an interchange on Interstate 840. And then the Thompson Lane project, that's a TDOT project, is currently under design, and we're hoping to see that advance very quickly, but that will be contingent on funding by TDOT.
Any other questions from Mr.
Going back to the bike trail, approximately how many linear feet are we looking at here to get from the soccer facility over to Thompson Lane?
My recollection is about 6,000 feet, a little bit under that. About 3,000 would be on the city-owned property to the north, and about 3,000 is what I recall on this property.
So roughly a mile.
Roughly a mile, yes.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Huddleston. Okay, any other questions before I open the public hearing? If not, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak. Nobody? Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. Ms. Jones? Yes, ma'am.
I also wanted to ask Mr. Milchin about, it looks like, and it may just be, my eyes or something, but Is the connection over to General's Landing, does that line up exactly, or is it offset a little bit?
At this stage, with the drawings we got that are PDFs and so forth that we use for graphic reference in regards to building this, it will connect. We'll get our plans worked out with Huddleston Steel, who did that development, and then when we get into the construction and design phase of that, we'll make certain that those two roadways line up. It's just graphically at this point, they just didn't line up. So
I thought that was probably it, but just wanted to make sure. And then I think, we kind of talked at the work session when we first looked at this about the possibility of some, what are we going to do about the, there's nothing else you can do
Traffic.
with this piece of property, but it's almost, the drag strip down.
Traffic calming.
Yes, sir. Do we talk about maybe trying to put a three-way stop, or
We have.
maybe some little, not really roundabouts, but little bulb type areas in there somewhere?
Actually, I think what we're looking at, and Mr. Balachandra might be a better one to answer that, but if you'll notice where that intersection coming in from the adjacent development, that may end up being a three-way stop or something of that nature to slow traffic before it goes up. And then we purposely also put that jog at the end as a traffic calming. Yes. We are very cognizant and concerned that we do not want to make this just a long quarter-mile strip.
Okay. If there's no other questions, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion for approval, subject to any and all staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. Item G is a zoning application for approximately 6.6 acres located along Salem Creek Drive to be rezoned from OG to PRD, known as Ashton at Salem Creek. David Alcorn is the applicant. Which one? Okay, Ms. Green.
This next application is for you to consider changing the zone for approximately 9 parcels located along Salem Creek Drive and Salem Creek Court. You can see the parcels identified in the color on the maps that are before you. These properties are currently zoned OG, and that's General Office District, and allows various types of office and very light commercial uses by right in the OG district. These 9 lots are currently undeveloped. Adjacent to them to the south is an additional lot that was a part of the subdivision that is developed with an office. The properties to the north are zoned CF, that's Commercial Fringe District, and the Salem Creek Church of Christ is contiguous to the property on the north side. The properties to the east are zoned CF, Commercial Fringe District, and PRD, a part of the Three Rivers development. The properties to the south are zoned OG, so the space between this property and the south it's zoned OG, and then there are some properties further south zoned RS12 and a part of a developed single-family subdivision. The properties across Salem Creek Drive are zoned for single-family purposes, but is developed as the Fellowship Methodist Church. As proposed, to be zoned as PRD is to allow a change of use from the commercial use to a residential use to allow 42 multifamily townhomes on 6.6 acres for a density of 6.4 dwelling units per acre. The units that front along Salem Creek Drive will have rear access garages, but those units that are along Salem Creek Court will have front access garages, front entry garages. The applicants have requested for 5 of the units a reduced setback to 25 feet, and those are the ones that are furthest to the back in the cul-de-sac. And that's just a result of the depth of the lots in the cul-de-sac that takes some additional space. There was a neighborhood meeting held for this project last night at your recommendation, and the neighborhood meeting was held at the Fellowship United Methodist Church. It was well attended with approximately 20 residents. We've provided to you a program book with specifications of the plan. At this time, I'd like to invite the representative of the applicant to the lectern. He's got a brief PowerPoint presentation he'd like to go through. Clyde Roundtree, after which I'll be glad to answer questions. Otherwise, you should conduct your public hearing.
Thank you, Margaret Ann. I'm Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering, Chairman Lamb, Commissioners, staff. I might need a little help here finding the exact PowerPoint, Margaret Ann, real quick.
I think you need to get out of the other one, so if you press escape.
Oh, just press escape? Okay.
Mm-hmm. You can close it.
And close.
Yours should be pulled up at the bottom.
There we go. Thank you.
Yep. Margaret Ann, you want me to go help him?
I like to see him
Squirm a little bit.
squirm.
Squirming.
Go to slideshow. and play.
As Margaret Ann mentioned, I'm here accompanying David Alcorn, who's the developer for this piece of property. It is called Ashton at Salem Creek. Is it not hitting up, Matthew? One more step. I try to hit on.
Thank you for bringing this.
Fantastic.
These two sorry suckers didn't do it.
Okay, Mr. Roundtree.
Technology. Just as far as existing conditions for the particular site, it's, as Margaret Ann mentioned, on the right corner of the property is an existing business that looks like a small brick home, two-story brick home. And then across, adjacent relationships across the street of the Salem Creek Church of Christ, and also the Fellowship Methodist Church as well. There's a Dollar General adjacent to the property right off of New Salem Highway, and then across New Salem Highway is the new Walmart Marketplace. And the Salem Creek subdivision is at the end of the road that we'll be using for access onto our property. So with that in mind, just some adjacent uses, just to let you know, the neighbors here that are all represented are all from the Salem Creek subdivision. Met a lot of them last night at the neighborhood meeting. As far as the existing site, it's basically a flat site with a decent amount of vegetation along the perimeters. And as Margaret Ann mentioned, it's already been platted, so that gravel driveway right there is an existing. It's a road it's been platted, but it already has existing utilities, so it has electrical as well as sewer. And that's important to note because it influenced the site plan. The reason we required that limited front setback was a result of the alignment of the road. So just want to duly note that. The site plan, as was mentioned, 42 attached homes. That will basically be modules of 4. However, on the front portion, looking exactly across from the Salem Road, those will be 5-unit buildings, and we have some special requests from the neighbors that we're going to respect in terms of what they've asked us to do. And I'm going to go ahead and hand this out. Last night at the neighborhood meeting, the neighbors asked that the units that are facing the access road would be all brick. That would be more consistent with their current neighborhood. And Mr. David Alcorn said that would be an accommodation we'd gladly make. So the fronts, the sides, and the rear of the units that are facing the road, Salem Creek Boulevard, will be all brick, consistent with the neighborhood.
The two roads have similar names. Salem Creek Drive is the main road, and Salem Creek Court is this cul-de-sac. And he's referring to those units that face Salem Creek Drive, which leads into the subdivision, so those ones with the rear access.
And what this letter states is basically a commitment on behalf of the developer that the buildings that are facing Salem Creek Boulevard will be all brick. And the neighbors also requested that there be a sidewalk that is in front of those units, of those homes, and that's just a little sidewalk and just to kind of keep a residential character. So they're also, Mr. Alcorn committed to having the sidewalk as well. So all brick facades as well as the front sidewalk. They did ask specifically that the sidewalks do not connect to Salem Creek Boulevard because they don't want the possibility of having any kind of drop-off potential where people stop on Salem Creek like a UPS store and then you're a UPS driver or FedEx and walk up to the units. So the commitment's made, the letter's associated with it, but we wanted a company letter because it's not currently in the pattern book. The elevations, the architectural character, these two sets of units are not in the pattern book. So if it's approved tonight, we'll adjust the pattern book accordingly in response to the neighbors' concerns. We continue on with the site plan. As was mentioned, 42 units. They all have front entry garages, a 1-car front entry garage with the capability of loading 2 more cars in the driveway. And that's really preventing any kind of on-street parking. There's also 3 accessory lots that are associated with the development, and they'll be for both residents and guests. Again, that's to kind of keep the cars off the main road. There is an amenity center on the back right corner. It's a pavilion that's associated with the rear accessory parking lot. So you want to make that of note. As far as the architectural character is concerned, this is a front elevation of a typical 4-unit home, and they're all basically masonry products with stone, brick, and cement fiberboard. There will be some variations in color, obviously some variations in roof line. All the homes will have a nice little entry porch. So nice architectural character. I think the neighbors were happy with the general appearance of the buildings themselves. So I'm glad to present that. There's the front, rear, and side elevations of the buildings. So all the sides, which was brought up by the neighbors, as well as we know it's kind of a city standard, to make sure the sides of the buildings have some sort of character versus being kind of a blank stare type of building. So the sides do have windows and doors, so it has a kind of more of a residential character to it. And there's a basic floor plan. We can go through that. And the last thing that came up was the site plan was the landscaping. The neighbors asked, and we already committed to foundation planting among the homes, but they would like along the New Salem Boulevard that there'd be a nicely landscaped, kind of heavily landscaped, and Mr. Alcorn's willing to do that. We also proposed street trees along New Salem Court, which will kind of give that more soften the character. City staff was originally concerned. Our original proposal had the driveways wider, but it just was too much concrete, so we narrowed the driveways, backed off the setbacks, and added some landscaping in order to soften the appearance. The neighbors were also concerned that, they wanted to make sure the character along Salem Creek Boulevard had much the same character as their neighborhood, but they didn't really want to look down and see all the homes as well. They wanted to see that there'd be some landscaping, and we think we can accommodate that concern they have. They're concerned about any kind of off-site, like adjacent looks into the building or into the development where they could see the parking lots or the dumpsters, and we told them that those would be screened. Around the whole perimeter of the property is a Type A buffer, which is basically a bumper-to-bumper evergreen kind of planting. So that alleviates some of the concern as well, to make sure that there's an evergreen divider between the adjacent properties. As I mentioned, the presentation is brief, but I'm here to answer any questions you may have. I'm sure the neighbors will have some things they would like to express, but we do thank them for their time. We spent some good time afterwards, even with Mr. Alcorn, just kind of walking through more details. Thank you for the city staff who came last night to help us walk through to the best of their abilities any kind of concerns the neighbors had. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Roundtree?
Mr. Roundtree, what type of utilities are here? Are they underground, above ground?
They're underground. Yes, sir.
The lengths of the driveway, it looks like some of them are longer than others, but it looks like there would be a minimum area of at least 2 cars to be able to be parked.
Yeah, Mr. Halliburton, when you see it kind of pinched down in the back corner, that's
Right.
where the alignment of the road really had an impact on how the home's laid out. So where Margaret Ann mentioned we're asking for a reduced setback of 25 feet where that kind of pinch point is. But those driveways are wider to accommodate 2 cars at a minimum.
Unlike a lot of the developments we see that are pretty close together, you have some pretty good guest parking in here, it looks like, so I appreciate you designing that into the plan. Any other comments or questions before I open the public hearing? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I will be abstaining from any comment and/or vote on this application.
Mrs. Jones will abstain. Okay, thank you, Mr. Roundtree. I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
Good evening. My name is Chelsea Cooper. I'm a resident of the Salem Creek neighborhood that's directly south of the property being proposed. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee for allowing me to speak on behalf of myself and my neighbors in the Salem Creek neighborhood here about some of the questions and the concerns that we have regarding the rezoning proposal for the area in front of our neighborhood on the east side of Salem Creek Drive, just south of New Salem Highway. Currently, this area is zoned as general office district, as we've heard, and the proposal is to rezone to planned residential district. And that has us concerned for several reasons, which I want to lay out at this point. First, we'd like a little bit of clarification. Based on the information that's been provided, Ashton at Salem Creek will be comprised of attached townhomes with 4 townhome units per building. And as was mentioned previously, this qualifies the development as multifamily housing. Per a previous city council decision and a recent Facebook post by our mayor, there's a temporary moratorium in place for rezoning to multifamily due to the overabundance of multifamily dwellings already available and currently waiting to be built. So we're wondering if Murfreesboro really needs another multifamily area and if this rezoning is really necessary. Second, traffic was a major concern for us and one that was brought up at the neighborhood meeting last night. Our neighborhood is currently in the process of adding 40 additional homes, and there are 42 units proposed for this development. By the time both are finished, our best case scenario is the addition of 82 cars to the traffic flow, and more realistically, closer to 200 if you consider about 2 cars per family. Currently at peak times, especially in the morning, traffic backs up from I-24 all the way back to our neighborhood along New Salem Highway, and it can take upwards of 10 minutes just to turn onto New Salem from Salem Creek Drive during those peak times. The traffic backup also greatly impedes visibility of oncoming traffic, and we're concerned about the safety of those conditions. We feel adding an additional 200 cars will exacerbate the problem greatly. And while traffic would increase slightly for a general office development, it would not be nearly as significant. It would be more evenly spaced throughout the day, and much of it would be coming onto New Salem Drive as opposed to, or Salem Creek Drive, as opposed to off of it and onto New Salem Road. Based on these concerns, we're wondering if a traffic study has been conducted to determine the impact of this development. And if one is not, we respectfully request that you postpone the rezoning decision until a traffic study can be conducted. Finally, we recognize that we're a small voice in this decision process. We fully stand behind the concerns that I've just expressed, and we believe that they will be thoughtfully considered as you make your decision. Our hope is that you'll vote for the area to remain zoned as general office, but should that not happen, we respectfully request that a contingency be added for the developer. This contingency, which it looks like they've already addressed a bit, would require the developer to work with a delegation of Salem Creek residents to come to an agreement on the front and side elevations and landscaping that face Salem Creek Drive to ensure a look and feel that is consistent with our current standards. We'd also request that the contingency include requirements for screening of the dumpsters and parking areas within the development. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, thank you again for your time and your consideration.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Anybody?
A couple things that we asked for last. I'm sorry, I'm Diane
State your name,
Caldwell's.
please.
A couple things that we asked for.
I'm sorry,
was-
ma'am. Would you state your name and give your address?
Oh, Diane Caldwell's. Okay.
Give your address, please.
2738 Beulah Drive.
Thank you.
Didn't hear that. Was to improve with brick on the 2 houses, and everything that we suggested and asked that they please do to help us out, they did. The traffic, I don't know what you're going to do with it, but we're hoping when you get New Salem working, it's going to work. But the developers have been more than generous with what they've offered us. Several of us do not have a problem with this subdivision going in over there. Our main concern is just the traffic. They've gone over and above to help us out, and we appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anybody else?
My name is Eric McKay. I live at 2743 Presley Drive. Just wanted to reiterate, we do have a problem with the subdivision. We do want to keep it zoned the way it is. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Anybody else? Okay, seeing no one come forward, and we'll close the public hearing. One of the planners, whoever would like to tackle it, I think there's a question brought up about the multifamily moratorium.
Sure, I'll be glad to answer it. When the moratorium was proposed and voted upon, Planning Department reached out to City Council to ask for clarification, and the clarification was that the moratorium applied to multifamily zones such as RM16 and RM12, those traditional apartment complexes, that it did not apply to the type of multifamily that we see today, which is a fee simple ownership. It's not just an apartment complex where you rent a unit. It's actually where you buy the unit yourself and you have some ownership investment in there. So this development is not a part of that moratorium. I don't know what the vote will be, of course, from Planning Commission or City Council, but the clarification we got was that this was something that we could bring forward to Planning Commission, City Council if it's been requested.
Okay. We know the traffic situation on Highway 99 up there. Mr. Huddleston, can you comment on the status of the state contract on the improvements to 99, please?
Yes, Chairman Lamb, we keep a close eye on the funding and the progress on that. It's our understanding that'll be in the December bid letting, December 2017. I'm going to just look at ROM and 2018 bid letting was a current update on that. So that means the project will go to bid in about 2 years, and it's probably about a 2-year construction process.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Any other questions by members of the Planning Commission?
I did have one additional comment from the letter that we received from Mr. Roundtree, and I'm glad to see that they are working with the neighbors, and I think that the developer has a history of wanting to work with developers, and he's committed to a couple things in here that if this is something that you decide to approve, we'll make sure that the book gets revised accordingly. One was for the brick units, and the other is that the homes facing Salem Creek Boulevard have a sidewalk running along the front of the homes, and we're fine with that. In the presentation from Mr. Roundtree, he said that he didn't want to connect those sidewalks to the public sidewalk, that we would require them to build along Salem Creek Drive. That would be inconsistent with what we would expect. We in Murfreesboro want connectivity of sidewalks, connectivity of roads, so we would expect that the sidewalks would connect to the public sidewalk system, as these people or anybody has a right to walk to the public sidewalk network, and we would hope that that would encourage people to walk rather than drive to the developments that will happen to the north. So the letter doesn't say that, but in his presentation he said that he didn't want to connect the private sidewalks with the homes to the public sidewalk. However, it would be consistent of us to expect them to connect those, so I just want to make that clear.
Are you okay with that, Mr. Alcorn?
You don't have a choice.
I don't understand.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm trying to understand what you were saying, Margaret Ann. What we were going to do, there's a sidewalk that comes all the way down and around Salem Creek Court. Mm-hmm. It's going to come out the front doors with connecting to a sidewalk that comes across the front and connects to Salem Creek Court on both sides with those units, instead of out to Salem Creek Drive, which is a main drive, to try to prevent. There's two things there. There's also an open ditch there, but then to prevent, so the deliveries or anybody coming to a sidewalk would pull onto Salem Creek Court. So it would still be connecting to a public sidewalk. It would all have interconnectivity throughout. You could walk from 99 down in through Salem Creek Court and all the way back into the Salem Creek subdivision.
Developers are required to build sidewalk along the public right-of-way. You would be required to build, if it's not there, a public sidewalk along Salem Creek Drive. In this letter, it looks like you're committing to doing an additional sidewalk, so that would be 2 parallel sidewalks. And you may want to clarify what your intent is, but we would require and expect the public sidewalk to be constructed. It's not just for the benefit of this development, but the development to the south. And then any private sidewalks would connect to that public sidewalk.
Okay, and I do understand the sidewalk coming down Salem Creek Drive. Mm-hmm. And it would also round the corner into Salem Creek Court and continue on.
It would.
The connecting from the front door, the sidewalk that we build as a builder, connecting to that sidewalk, you're saying it has to connect straight on to the Salem Creek Drive, or can it connect to the same sidewalk that's on Salem Creek Court just off of the main drag?
They may want to work on an illustration for you,
okay.
But each sidewalk doesn't have to have a straight connection, but there needs to be a connection point that connects the public and the private sidewalks if you're doing two.
And I think we have the right understanding. I think just, again, having a diagram of it will...
I just don't want there to be misunderstanding tonight.
Okay.
But you've referred to the ditch that was running along, what is it, Salem Creek Drive. And I think what myself and Margaret Ann is probably implying is that there would be parallel sidewalks, one on either side of the ditch, one for the drive, which would be for pedestrian use along the drive. And then if you don't want service deliveries parking on the drive and you want them to pull up into the neighborhood in order to make deliveries,
then you would have a parallel on the other side of the ditch that would go to the front of the residence, if that's what you would like to have.
Correct. Correct.
But basically, what you would have would be parallel sidewalks that would go across the front of the project.
With the ones that are constructed in front of the residence to end at the last home, it wouldn't have an interconnectivity like the sidewalk would that's on Salem Creek Drive.
Yeah, I personally think
This is something that really I think should have been worked out before it came before the planning commission, so.
I got this letter at the same time you did.
Yeah, you just.
Well, this is,
Can you do
and
this
this is all from
administrative?
last night's meeting that we had, fulfilling the residents' requests. And
If we send this on to city council, you just need to make your notations in your plan book accordingly, Mr. Roundtree.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Alcorn.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Roundtree or Mr. Alcorn? Now we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to all staff comments, working out the sidewalk issues in the agreements that the developer made tonight.
With the neighborhood.
With the neighborhood, yeah.
Motion is made. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We have one abstention. Mrs. Jones. Okay, item H, zoning application for approximately .72 acres located along 720 Old Salem Road to be rezoned from RM12 to Commercial Highway. John Rudd is the applicant. Ms. Green, I presume.
It is. This is my last one. Tonight. For some reason, our computers don't like the map that we have, but this next item is for you to consider a zoning change request for the property located at 720 Old Salem Road. This property is shaded in blue on the map before you, and it's located at the intersection of Old Salem Road and Douglas Avenue. It is currently zoned RM12, and that's multifamily residential district. The property has a 31,500 square foot building or structure currently located on it. Its previous use was as a church or institutional groups assembly, but the BZA did grant a special use permit in April to allow it to be used as a group shelter. The properties contiguous to this on two sides are zoned RM12, and that's multifamily residential district. Across Old Salem Drive, a property is zoned heavy industrial district, and it's some older single-family homes and some industrial-type developments. And the request is for you to consider changing the zoning from the multifamily zone, RM12, to commercial highway district. And I did compile a list showing the uses permitted in just the commercial highway and commercial fringe districts in your agenda materials if you'd like to look over that list. And the reason they've asked for a zoning change is the use that the applicant, Mr. Rudd, would like to have, or Dr. Rudd would like to have here, is permitted with a special use permit, but he would like to construct some warehouses on this property as well and have those be rented out. And he believes that that income that he may make from the warehouses would help fund the group shelter, although he intends to move forward with the group shelter regardless of whether or not the zoning change happens, and will operate one whether or not the zoning change happens. He'd like the opportunity to develop it with those warehouses. And so he's asking for a commercial highway zone. The commercial highway district is intended to permit the development and continued maintenance of general commercial uses located in a linear fashion along highways and near transportation facilities and industrial areas. You should conduct a public hearing to consider this matter. I don't believe they have a presentation, or Clyde didn't tell me he had a presentation for this. If you have any questions, though, we'll be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing.
Okay. Any questions for the staff? Okay, I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Nobody? Close the public hearing. There's no comments by members of the Planning Commission. We're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve based on staff comments.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second motion.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item I, a zoning application for approximately 3.1 acres located along Halls Hill Pike and Journey Drive to be rezoned from RM16 to RZ 1.8 acres, and commercial local, 1.3 acres. Swanson Development is the applicant. Mr. Plumley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. Our next public hearing is a rezoning request for a lot that is located on the northeast corner of Halls Hill Pike and Journey Drive. It is currently zoned RM16. Property has remained vacant for a number of years. Mr. Swanson has owned it. It was a part of the tract that was annexed and zoned with a variety of different zoning classifications around 2003, and on which Mr. Swanson has developed the Providence Point subdivision, which is located to the north and zoned RS10. There is an existing multi-tenant commercial building along with a car wash and a self-storage facility directly to the east that is zoned commercial local. And to the north of the subject property is also zoned RM16, and that was a part of the same tract, and it has been developed with the Grove apartment complex. But this tract has sat vacant for a number of years, zoned RM16. Mr. Swanson has recently platted it and has sold an interest in it to a co-developer of his, and they wish to rezone the property, the northern portion, which is colored in purple, from RM16 to RZ, zero lot line residential district. That would be 1.8 acres. And the frontage along Halls Hill Pike, 1.3 acres to CL, which, as I mentioned, is the same zoning classification, same commercial zoning classification that's located directly to the east of the subject property. Mr. Swanson has indicated that he and his partner intend to develop the property with commercial retail type development along the front, and on the northern portion of the property would be a single cul-de-sac which would have roughly 10 to 15 zero lot line single family homes, single family detached homes. Of course, this isn't a planned development, so his development intentions are just that, are development intentions, and would be subject to change. He has just indicated that those development intentions as a good faith effort to tell you what he plans to do with the property. I mentioned the surrounding land uses to the east, west, and north. To the south of the subject property is located in the unincorporated county, and there are a variety of uses to the south of the subject property across Halls Hill Pike, including several single-family residences, a gas station, a nightclub, and a lodge. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after you conduct the public hearing, and Mr. Swanson is here if you have any questions for him as well.
Any questions from the Planning Commission?
So realistically, the zoning is reducing the density, correct?
Yes, sir. Under the current RM16 zoning, you can see approximately 48 dwelling units that could be developed max on the property. And you know, the 1.8 acres that's zoned, or that's proposed to be zoned RZ, I don't know exactly what the max that you could get on that would be, but Mr. Swanson has indicated that the max that he intends to get on that would be about 10 to 15 single-family lots.
Any other questions?
Matthew, is this one lot, and we're dividing it with somewhat zigzag line that's going across the property?
Yes, sir. That zigzag line is not just arbitrary. It is, Mr. Swanson has been working with Mr. Roundtree and the folks at Huddleston Steel Engineering on a concept plan. It hasn't been submitted yet, but we have seen kind of an unofficial copy of it, which does show a public right-of-way, a cul-de-sac coming into the property off of Journey Drive, and lots on the north side of that cul-de-sac backing up to the apartment complex, and a retail building along Halls Hill Pike that would also get secondary access from that new cul-de-sac.
But that's primarily because of usage then, not because of some geographical change in the property line?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward to speak.
We don't get downsizes very often, do we?
Good evening. Joe Swanson Jr., 1188 Park Avenue. Thank you, Chairman Lamb, Commissioner, staff. At the end of the public hearing, I would ask that you defer this so that we can work out some design concerns that we have with my partner. If that would be acceptable, I would appreciate it. If any questions, I'm here and available.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Swanson.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing. What are the wishes of this commission?
At the request of the developer, I will move for deferral.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item J is a zoning application for approximately 8 acres located along South Rutherford Boulevard to be rezoned from RS10 to RZ. Swanson Development is the applicant. Mr. Blumley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. And just one clarification on the previous motion, that would be indefinitely until the developer comes back to staff and requests that it be placed back on.
Since it's at his request, yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the clarification. Our final public hearing tonight is for approximately 8 acres located along the west side of South Rutherford Boulevard. It's shown in the purple color on the map in front of you. It's currently undeveloped, and Mr. Swanson has recently purchased the property. It's zoned RS10, just like the single-family residential Rogers Estates subdivision that is located to the north of the property. You'll see Aspen Avenue and Rutherford Street. Those are part of the Rogers Estates subdivision, which was developed, I would say, in the 50s or 60s, just to the north of the property. To the west of the property is the Carolyn Court single-family residential subdivision, which is also zoned RS10. It's a little bit newer, probably developed in the 80s or 90s. To the east of the subject property across South Rutherford Boulevard is also zoned RS10, and that's the Stonegate single-family residential subdivision. To the south of the subject property is zoned RM12 and PUD, and there are a couple of developments there. The frontage at the intersection of Bradyville Pike and South Rutherford Boulevard is the Brendleton Crossing subdivision, which is a zero lot line subdivision, which consists of some zero lot line attached and some zero lot line detached homes located right there on the corner of that intersection. And the larger parcel zoned RM12 is the Point at Eastdale apartment complex. The applicant has requested to rezone this 8 acres to RZ, and he does intend to move forward rather quickly with a single-family residential development on the subject property. Don't know for certain whether or not he would actually be constructing the homes or just developing the subdivision, but he has indicated that he does wish to move forward with a single-family residential development on the property. The reason for the request is the RZ does permit smaller lots than the RS10 zone permits, and he feels that the RZ zone would be more appropriate for the property, and certainly it would allow him to achieve a greater lot yield on the property than the current RS10 zoning. The property, as you can see, has 2 stub streets into it, Rutherford Street and an unnamed stub street off of Aspen Avenue, and of course there is the frontage on South Rutherford Boulevard, so there is good connectivity to the property for future connectivity both to the north and to the east of the subject property. With that being said, we need to conduct a public hearing on this request tonight to rezone this property to RZ. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Swanson is in the audience if you have any questions for him.
Okay, any questions? I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak.
Yeah, I thought it'd be late.
Last chance. Close the public hearing. Any questions or comments by members of the Planning Commission?
Matthew, when you make a change from RS10 to RZ like this and there is an increased density, is there also any requirement that would require green space, or that I mean, is there something in there that's going to for detention ponds and retention, is there something in there that's going to protect the surrounding neighborhood from perhaps water runoff or anything like that?
Certainly at the preliminary plat and construction plan stage, our engineering department will look at the drainage and whether or not what drainage features and or detention features this proposed subdivision would have to have is unknown at this time, but we would, our engineering department would scrutinize the plans to make sure there would be no increased runoff from the subject property onto the adjacent lots. As far as open space, exclusive of common drainage features, the RZ zone does have some protections. For example, with the lots being smaller, there is a requirement for a certain percentage of the required front yard, the required front setback, to remain green. And so those are the kind of things that have to be demonstrated when someone comes in for a building permit in the RZ zone.
And we sometimes see pavilions and walking trails and things like that put in as well. Is that something that is credited towards green space?
The green space requirement in the RZ zone is purely on a lot-by-lot basis. It's each lot has to demonstrate that it meets it. For a tract of this size, it would probably, and Mr. Swanson can speak to this, it would probably be difficult to achieve a great number of amenities or to take up a great amount of space on the property with amenities, just simply because it's got limited size to begin with.
Any other questions?
Good question.
Any other questions? Now we're ready for a motion.
Move for approval, subject staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That concludes our 10 public hearings this evening. We'll go now to Mr. Whitaker's favorite portion, staff reports and other comments. Mr. Whitaker?
I have none, staff.
Bless you.
And Chairman Lamb, I have none.
Holy
Bless you,
smokes.
Mr. Lewis, Mr. Orellis? Okay. If there's no more business, we stand adjourned.